Good morning, students. Myself, Major Komal Katyal, Department of Zoology, GK Govani Government College, Bhinmal. In a series of lectures on physiology of digestion, this is my second lecture on physiology of digestion. In the first part, we have studied about the digestion taking place in the buccal cavity, where mechanical digestion of food material as well as chemical digestion of food material takes place. And after the digestion of food material in the buccal cavity, the food material is known as a bolus, and this bolus is then swallowed through the opening of the esophagus, and from esophagus through the peristaltic movement it goes to the stomach via cardiac orifice or cardiac sphincter. This is the revision of what we have learned in my previous lecture. Now let us discuss about the digestion taking place in the gastric region. Now first let us discuss about the anatomical feature of stomach. सबसे पहले हम पढ़ेंगे आमाशय की आंतरिक संरचना के बारे में. Stomach is a J-shaped muscular bag, as it is also clear from the rough sketch shown in this slide, that stores the food you eat and breaks it down into the tiny pieces. It mixes food with the gastric juice that contains enzyme to break down proteins and lipids. It contains an acid, that is hydrochloric acid, and this hydrochloric acid in the stomach kills bacteria and maintains acidic pH in the stomach. In fact, it is very highly acidic. The food material that is digested in the stomach is known as chyme or chyme. Basically, it is acidic chyme because of presence of high concentration of hydrochloric acid. The stomach takes approximately 4 hours to do its job on the food material. It means if you take a meal, stomach will take at least minimum 4 hours to digest the food material. But it also depends upon the kind of food material you are taking. Now, the function of the stomach. First, it can store the food material because it can stretch to fit approximately 2 liters of food material. It is responsible for disinfecting the food material due to presence of high concentration of hydrochloric acid with a pH approximately 2. It is responsible for chemical digestion due to presence of certain enzyme. First one is the proteolytic enzyme pepsin, which breaks down the protein. Now here a question arises, why the stomach, which is made up of protein, is not digested? What stops the stomach from auto-digesting itself? The mucus secreted by stomach cell protects the stomach lining, as well as there are presence of tight junctions, and regularly the mucosal layer of the stomach is renewed, and all these factors are responsible for preventing the auto digestion of the stomach. Now let us discuss about the gastric juice, which is secreted by the stomach. Its pH is highly acidic from 1.5 to 2.5 due to presence of high concentration of hydrochloric acid. Pepsin, I have already told you, it is an enzyme that breaks down the large proteins into amino acids or peptones. Renin, a milk curdling enzyme which is responsible for coagulation of milk, but it is absent in human beings. The gastric lipase, which is a weak lipolytic enzyme. Lipolytic means those enzymes which act on the lipid food material. and an intrinsic factor which facilitates the absorption of vitamin B12, that is cyanocobalamin. Now, if you look at the anatomical part of the stomach, you can easily observe there is presence of a cardioesophageal sphincter which prevents the backflow or back movement of the food material from stomach to the esophagus. Then it has the fundus part, the main body portion, and then the pyloric part. So stomach can be divisible into the cardiac region, the fundic region, the main body, and the pyloric region. The cardiac region actually connects esophagus with the stomach, while the pyloric region connects the stomach to the intestine, and here the pyloric sphincter or a wall is present which prevents the back movement of the food material which goes to the duodenum, which is the first part of small intestine. The gastric mucosa secretes large amount of gastric juice. जो आमाशय की म्यूकस वाली झिल्ली की कोशिकाएं हैं वो जठर रस का स्रावन करती हैं, और ये जठर रस का जो माध्यम है बहुत अधिक अम्लीय होता है क्योंकि इसके अंदर हाइड्रोक्लोरिक अम्ल की मात्रा बहुत अधिक होती है। एंजाइम की बात करें तो इसमें एक प्रोटीन के पाचन हेतु पेप्सिन और रेनिन तथा लिपिड या वसा के पाचन के लिए जठरीय लाइपेज एंजाइम होता है, और उसके अलावा एक इंट्रिंसिक कारक पाया जाता है जो विटामिन B12, B12 या साइनोकोबालामिन के अवशोषण में सहायता प्रदान करता है। So food is further broken down into a thin liquid which is called the acidic chyme. Now let us look at the composition of gastric juice. अब हम बात करते हैं जठर रस के composition या रासायनिक संगठन के बारे में। Approximately 2 to 3 liters of gastric juice are secreted per day in a human being with a specific gravity of 1.003 and pH varies from 1 to 1.5. It means highly acidic. Water content approximately 98.9%. The inorganic composition approximately 0.7 and organic substance approximately 3%. The inorganic substances include various iron, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, biphosphate, sulfate, and hydrochloric acid, which is more important. The organic substance include mucus, which is responsible for making an impermeable layer at the gastric mucosa, the pepsinogen, the inactive form of pepsin, which when come in contact with hydrochloric acid becomes the active form, that is the pepsin, prorenin, the inactive form of enzyme renin, which in presence of pepsin converted into renin, the gastric lipase and caselase intrinsic factor. The gastric juice has 3 phases of control. One, the cephalic phase, second, the gastric phase, and the third one, the intestinal phase. During the cephalic phase, the sight, smell, or taste of food material stimulates the gastric mucosa to secrete the gastric juice. कहने का मतलब यह है कि भोज्य पदार्थ के देखने मात्र या गंध और स्वाद से ही जठरीय जूस या जठर रस का स्रावन होना प्रारंभ हो जाता है। The second phase, which is the gastric phase, in the presence of a hormone, that is the gastrin hormone, the secretion of gastric juice is stimulated. एक हार्मोन होता है जिसको हम बोलते हैं गैस्ट्रिन। इस हार्मोन की उपस्थिति जठर रस के स्रावन को उद्दीपित करती है। The third one is the intestinal phase. The entropogastron or enterogastron is a hormone which is released by the intestinal mucosa. which is secreted by the intestine, and this hormone actually inhibits the secretion of gastric juice. जैसे ही भोज्य पदार्थ ड्यूोडेनम के अंदर पहुंचता है तो आंतरिक कोशिकाएं क्या करती हैं, एक हार्मोन स्रावित करती हैं एंट्रोगेस्ट्रॉन, और यह एंट्रोगेस्ट्रॉन क्या करता है, जठर रस के स्रावण को संदमित करता है. Now let us discuss about the small intestine, which is the longest part of our digestive system. The small intestines are approximately 7 meters in length. They are known as the small intestine because their diameter is less than the diameter of large intestine. The lining of intestinal wall has finger-like projection called villi, and these villi has microvilli which increase the surface area. As you can see in the diagram also, the folds are increasing the surface area, and folds has villi and villi has microvilli, and there is presence of lacteal, which are basically the blind endings of lymph vessels. So basically intestine is responsible for maximum number of digestion. It contains various type of digestive juices which are secreted from accessory digestive gland as well as by the intestinal mucosa. Say for example, bile is released by the liver, which is actually stored in the gallbladder, and from gallbladder it comes into the duodenum. The pancreas is responsible for secreting the pancreatic juice, the exocrine function of pancreas, and the Brunner's gland in the intestinal mucosa are responsible for releasing the intestinal juice. कहने का मतलब यह है कि आंत के अंदर पित्त रस जो यकृत से निकलकर पित्ताशय में आता है और पित्ताशय से फिर ड्यूोडेनम में, उसी तरह से अग्नाशय से अग्नाशयी रस का स्रावण होता है, तथा जो आंत की कोशिकाएं वे आंतरिक रस का स्रावण करती हैं. तो ये तीनों प्रकार के पाचन रस पाचन करने के लिए जिम्मेदार होते हैं. अत्यधिक जो पाचन की प्रक्रिया है वो एक छोटे से भाग ड्यूोडेनम के अंदर ही पूर्ण होती है. Now these villi and microvilli are responsible for increasing the surface area as well as to increase the surface area for absorption. अवशोषण की सतह को ये माइक्रोविलाई सूक्ष्मांकुर और अधिक बढ़ाते हैं. Now what are the main factors that are responsible for increasing the absorption in the small intestine? First, it's longest part of the alimentary canal. Second, it has greater surface area. So when the nutrients from the food passes into the bloodstream through the intestinal wall, it absorbs 80% of the ingested water. It absorbs vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, as well as the intestine is responsible for secreting the digestive enzyme through intestinal juice. The small intestine, the chemical digestion takes place here. Sugars and proteins are absorbed in the inner lining. Fatty acid and cholesterol go to the lymphatic system and line with the villi, which we have already discussed earlier. The functions include chemical digestion. It is the major organ of absorption because of length over 6 meters and surface area approximately 300 square meters, equal to size of a tennis court. It has a 3 section which we have already discussed earlier on: the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, which is mainly responsible for absorption of the food material. So duodenum is mainly responsible for digestion, while the remaining 2 parts are responsible for absorption of the food material. Thank you.